What is the creepiest or most unexplained thing that's happened to you that you still think about to this day? My Aunt Dorothy called me on a Tuesday morning asking if I could help her move some firewood into her basement before winter hit. She was 73, lived alone in this old farmhouse about 20 minutes outside of town, and had been stockpiling split oak in her backyard since August. The basement was the only place dry enough to store it properly, but the stairs were narrow and steep, and she didn't trust herself carrying armloads of wood down there. I drove out to her place around noon. The house had been in our family since the 1940s, one of those solid two-story farmhouses with a wraparound porch and a basement that had been dug out by hand when indoor plumbing was still a luxury. Dorothy had inherited it from my great-uncle Frank 15 years earlier and had been living there alone ever since her husband passed. She met me at the front door wearing her usual flannel shirt and work boots, keys in hand. "I've got to run into town for groceries," she said, handing me a glass of iced tea. "The basement door's already open for you, and there's probably 3 cords of wood out back that need to go down there. Take your time." The basement entrance was around the side of the house, with concrete steps leading down to a heavy wooden door that looked original to the house. Dorothy had left it propped wide open with a paint can, and I could see the interior stairs leading down into the cool darkness below. The basement itself was typical for an old farmhouse. Stone foundation walls, dirt floor, low ceiling with exposed joists, and that permanent smell of earth and old wood. I started hauling wood down from the pile in the backyard. Each trip took me about 3 minutes. Load up my arms with 4 or 5 pieces, carry them around to the basement entrance, down the concrete steps, through the door, down the interior wooden stairs, and stack them against the far wall. Then back up and repeat. My system worked perfectly for the first hour. The basement door stayed propped open, the paint can doing its job, and I got into a rhythm that let me move wood efficiently without wearing myself out. The interior door at the bottom of the basement stairs was also propped open, giving me a clear path from the outside to the storage area. On my 15th or 16th trip, I was stacking wood against the basement wall when I heard the door close above me. Not slam, just a solid thunk, like someone had pulled it shut. I looked up the stairs and saw that the interior basement door was now completely closed. That was weird, but not impossible. Maybe the paint can had shifted, or the door had been sitting at just the right angle to finally swing shut on its own. I climbed back up the stairs with my empty arms, ready to prop it open again. The deadbolt was locked. I stood there staring at the door handle for a solid minute, trying to process what I was seeing. The deadbolt was the old-fashioned kind that had to be turned by hand from either side. No way it could engage accidentally. Someone would have had to deliberately twist the lock mechanism to secure it. My first thought was that Dorothy had come home early and locked me in as some kind of joke. I yelled up the stairs, "Very funny, Aunt Dorothy." No response. I climbed back up to the small basement window that looked out toward the driveway. Her car wasn't there. I tried everything I could think of to explain what had happened. Maybe the door had slammed hard enough to somehow engage the deadbolt. I spent 20 minutes testing that theory, pulling the door shut from the inside with varying degrees of force. Nothing. The deadbolt stayed in the unlocked position every single time. The house was isolated enough that I would have heard any vehicle approaching. The driveway was gravel, and Dorothy's nearest neighbor was half a mile away. Plus, the wooden stairs leading down to the basement door creaked like crazy. I'd been listening to my own footsteps echo off them all afternoon. Anyone coming down those steps would have sounded like a marching band. I checked my phone. No signal, which was typical for that area. The basement window was too small to climb through, and the door was solid oak with steel hinges. I was effectively trapped until Dorothy came home. After an hour of trying to pick the lock with a screwdriver, I found on Uncle Frank's old workbench. I heard gravel crunching in the driveway. Dorothy's Buick pulled up, and I started yelling from the basement window. "What on earth are you doing down there?" she called back. "The door locked itself," I shouted. "The deadbolt turned somehow." Dorothy came around to the basement entrance, and I heard her fumbling with keys. The door opened, and she stood at the top of the stairs looking confused. "I left this door propped open," she said, looking at the paint can that was now sitting several feet away from where it should have been. "And I never locked this door. Haven't used that deadbolt in years." We both examined the lock mechanism. It turned smoothly. No sticking or binding. Dorothy tried the same tests I had, pulling the door closed to see if vibration or settling could somehow engage the deadbolt. Nothing worked. I finished moving the firewood, but the whole time I kept glancing up at that door, waiting for it to close again. It stayed propped open for the remaining 2 hours, exactly like it had for the first hour of work. That was 8 years ago, and I still think about it whenever I'm alone in an old house. Dorothy never found an explanation, and neither did I. She had the lock checked by a locksmith who said it was functioning normally. No ghosts, no hidden mechanisms, no logical reason why a deadbolt would engage itself while I was trapped on the wrong side of the door. Dorothy lived in that house for another 5 years before moving to assisted living. She never had another problem with doors locking themselves, and I helped her with projects around the house dozens of times after that. Whatever happened in the basement that day never repeated itself. I still don't know what to make of it.